Look closer. Most people are walking around with a price tag on their soul. When the account goes up, they feel worthy. When it drops, something inside them collapses. They did not choose this belief. It was installed, quietly, early, repeated until it felt like truth. Now every number feels personal. Every bill feels like judgment. Every gain feels like permission to breathe. But true financial sovereignty is not about how much you have. It is about detaching your self-esteem from the currency you carry. Today you dismantle the lie that your wealth defines your worth. Chapter 1. The price tag on your soul. You already know the feeling. A number moves, and your whole inner climate changes with it. Nothing in your character changed. Nothing in your discipline changed. Nothing in your humanity changed. But the screen glows a little brighter, or a little darker, and suddenly your chest tightens or relaxes, as if the number just delivered a verdict on your existence. That is not money management. That is identity exposure. The truth is, most people do not use money as a tool. They use money as a mirror, and then spend their lives staring into it, hoping it will finally tell them they are enough. It never does. It only gives short bursts of relief, followed by fresh hunger. It rewards for a moment, then it goes cold again. Stop for a second. Think about how often your mood has changed because of a balance, a bill, a market move, a missed payment, a delayed client, a smaller month than expected. Think about how quickly numbers become emotion, not thought, not strategy, emotion. That connection did not appear by accident. At some point, money stopped being something you handled and started becoming something that handled you. It stopped being a resource and became a witness. Then it became a judge. Then, without your permission, it became a measure of your worth. That is how the price tag got attached. Not all at once. Quietly, repeatedly, through everyday reactions that seemed normal enough to ignore. You work hard, you get paid, you feel relief, you feel important, you spend, you compare, you fall short, you feel smaller. Then you tell yourself you just need more. More income, more proof, more safety, more room to breathe. But the amount keeps moving because the problem was never only external. The problem was the meaning you attached to the number. This is where most people stop. They notice financial stress, but they never question the identity beneath it. They try to fix the anxiety by increasing the amount. They do not see that the anxiety keeps regenerating because the amount became a stand-in for dignity. Once that happens, no level feels stable. A person can make more and feel poorer. A person can earn more and feel more afraid. Because the deeper fear is not about money leaving, it is about worth disappearing with it. Pause here. If money feels like proof, then loss feels like exposure. That is why small financial shifts can create massive emotional reactions. Not because the event itself always poses real danger, but because it touches something older and deeper. If your inner world says, "I am safer when I have more," and "I am more valuable when I earn more," then every dip becomes a threat to identity. You do not just feel concern, you feel shame. You feel weak. You feel behind. You feel less real. Look at the language people use when money gets tight. I am failing. I am broke as a person, not just in a moment. I should be further ahead. I feel stupid. I feel embarrassed. Listen closely to those words. They are never just about currency. They are about self-condemnation. The account became a courtroom, and once that happens, every day becomes emotional roulette. A deposit brings confidence. A bill brings collapse. A good month makes you walk taller. A bad month makes you question your entire life. That is not stability. That is servitude. Your state is being controlled by something outside your character. The truth is, a number should inform you. It should not define you. A bank balance can tell you what is available. It cannot tell you who you are. A market loss can test your discipline. It cannot erase your dignity. Read that again in your mind, because most people never do. Most people let the daily scoreboard quietly decide how they feel about themselves, then call that adulthood. But it is not maturity. It is dependence disguised as ambition. It is emotional outsourcing. It is letting the outer world write sentences about your inner value. Stop for a second. How many times have you called yourself responsible when you were really just scared? How many times have you called yourself driven when you were really desperate for approval? How many times have you told yourself that this pressure is normal, when deep down you know it is eating your peace from the inside out? This is what makes the trap so hard to spot. It feels useful. It feels like motivation. It feels like seriousness. But if your motivation comes from fear of becoming worthless, then your success will never feel clean. It will always taste slightly contaminated. No matter how much you build, there will be a silent panic behind it, whispering that you must keep proving yourself, or the truth about you will be revealed. What truth? That you are not enough. That is the lie. That is the installed belief. And it hides inside respectable language, productivity, security, standards, progress, all fine words, all useful words, but behind them can sit an old wound wearing a suit. Behind them, a person can sit, begging a number to do what no number has ever done. Grant permanent self-respect. It cannot. Money can change your options. It can reduce pressure. It can create freedom of movement. It can protect your family. It can buy time. It can solve practical problems. But the truth is, it cannot settle the question of your worth, because that question was never financial in the first place. The heaviest part is this. Many people spend years building a life around a measurement that was never qualified to judge them. They give up peace for it. They sacrifice presence for it. They surrender silence for it. Then when it rises, they call that confidence. When it falls, they call that failure. All while never asking the most dangerous question in the room. Who told you this number gets to decide how you feel about yourself? Sit with that. Because if you never ask it, you will keep obeying something you never consciously chose. You will keep rising and collapsing with every financial shift. You will keep calling it reality when it is really conditioning. You will keep wearing the price tag and forgetting it was attached by human hands. And once you see the tag, the next question becomes impossible to avoid. Who put it there? Chapter 2. Who taught you this? Nobody wakes up one morning and invents a financial identity from scratch. You absorb it. You inherit it. You learn it in rooms where money was either feared, worshipped, hidden, fought over, or used as a silent measure of who mattered most. Long before you had language for value, you were already being taught what money meant. Not what money does, what money means. That is the part that shaped you. Maybe the house went quiet whenever bills came. Maybe success was praised in dollar amounts. Maybe struggle came with shame. Maybe rich people were spoken of as smarter, cleaner, stronger, more disciplined. Maybe poor people were spoken about like they were reckless, lazy, or weak. You heard things, you watched faces, you read tension in the room, and your nervous system learnt its lessons well. Children do not analyze. They absorb. They do not question family myths. They build inside them. That is why adult money beliefs can feel so personal and so true, even when they were borrowed. You may feel like your financial fears are yours by nature, when they are really echoes from earlier environments that trained you to react before you ever learned to choose. Stop here. Think about the first emotional memory you have around money, not the first purchase, the first feeling, fear, pride, envy, scarcity, tension, relief. What was in the air? That atmosphere matters because money was never just presented as a neutral tool. It came loaded with tone. Tone becomes meaning, meaning becomes identity. Then identity starts making decisions from the shadows. If a parent constantly stressed over not having enough, you may have learned that money equals survival, and that not having control over it means danger. If a parent measured worth through career status and income, you may have learned that respect must be earned through visible success. If money was used to control love, power, or approval, you may have learned that finances determine whether you are safe, accepted, or significant. None of these lessons had to be stated clearly. Most of them were not. That is what makes them powerful. The truth is, your deepest beliefs were probably taught through repetition rather than instruction. A sigh after opening the mailbox, a harsh comment about someone struggling, a glow of admiration around wealth, a warning about ending up with nothing, a constant undertone that money decides who gets to relax and who has to prove themselves. Then culture took over where family left off. You entered a world that treats wealth as character evidence. Expensive means superior. Visible success means competence. High income means discipline. Public comfort means importance. A person with money is assumed to know something. A person without it is assumed to have failed some test. That story is repeated in movies, headlines, schools, conversations, and now, all day, through glowing screens. Social media turned the whole thing into theater. Now people do not just have money. They perform identity through money. The vacation is proof. The watch is proof. The apartment is proof. The business class seat is proof. Even restraint can become performance. Quiet luxury, understated status. Same game, different costume. Stop for a second. When you scroll, what do you feel? Inspiration, pressure, envy, defeat, urgency. Be honest, because comparison does not need your permission to start working on you. The human mind is fast. It reads symbols before reason can catch up. A car becomes a verdict. A house becomes a verdict. Someone else being ahead becomes a verdict. And because the culture has spent years linking money with moral worth, your brain does not simply register difference, it registers hierarchy. That is why inherited beliefs feel more real than chosen ones. Chosen beliefs feel like statements. Inherited beliefs feel like gravity. You do not notice them because they are built into the way you interpret the world. They shape your reactions before your conscious mind even arrives. You tell yourself you want financial success for practical reasons. Some of that is true. But beneath the surface, you may also want to feel released from shame. You may want proof that you deserve respect. You may want to outrun a childhood feeling of not enough. You may want to silence people who never spoke directly, but made you feel small anyway. This is where most people stop. They improve strategy without examining source code. They learn investing, budgeting, earning, scaling, optimizing, useful skills, necessary skills. But the inner script remains untouched, so they keep creating from the same hidden belief. More money means more worth. Less money means less self. That belief simply gets better tools, and if the belief stays in place, success can become another prison, because now you have more to defend. More image to protect, more expectation to satisfy, more fear of slipping backward. The wound puts on a suit and starts calling itself achievement. The truth is, you did not build this belief. You inherited it from faces, voices, reactions, rewards, punishments, and silent assumptions that surrounded you before you knew how to filter them. That matters, not so you can blame someone forever, but so you can stop treating the belief like sacred truth. If it was installed, it can be examined. If it was learned, it can be unlearned. If it came from outside, it does not deserve total rule inside you. This is the shift, not anger, awareness. You do not need to hate your parents. You do not need to reject society in theatrical ways. You do not need to pretend money is irrelevant. You only need enough honesty to say, some of what I call my thinking is inherited programming. Some of what I call my standards are borrowed fears. Some of what I call truth arrived before I had the strength to question it. That honesty is power. Because once you see the belief as inherited rather than inevitable, you stop defending it. You stop calling it reality. You stop kneeling before it. You start studying it. And study creates distance. Distance creates choice. Choice is the first sign that control is coming back. You did not build this belief, but you have been living inside it as if you did. And as long as that remains unseen, every financial movement will keep pressing the same old alarm. Chapter 3. The Anxiety Machine. Once identity gets tied to money, your nervous system never really clocks out. It keeps watch. It keeps scanning. It keeps checking for proof that you are still safe, still valuable, still ahead enough to breathe. This is why financial anxiety can follow you even on good days, even after progress, even after a win. Because the issue is not only what is happening, the issue is what your mind has been trained to fear. When worth is attached to wealth, uncertainty becomes unbearable, not uncomfortable, unbearable. You check the account in the morning to feel settled. You check it again at noon because the feeling did not last. You check the market, messages, payments, invoices, trends, numbers, updates. You call it responsibility. Sometimes it is, but often it is something else. Reassurance seeking, a ritual attempt to silence panic, a loop designed to calm you for 5 minutes and hook you for the rest of the day. That is how anxiety builds its machine. It feeds on monitoring. Stop for a second. How often do you look at financial information that you cannot meaningfully act on in that moment? How often do you check just to feel okay? How often does the checking actually make you feel worse? The body does not care whether the threat is a tiger or a number, if the mind has labeled both as danger. Once your system learns that fluctuations in money equal exposure, it fires the same old alarm. Heart tightens, attention narrows, thoughts race. You start forecasting disaster, even if the actual shift is small. Then you seek relief by checking more planning, more mental noise. The relief never lasts. That is the point. If relief lasted, the machine would shut down. Instead, each check causes a brief drop in tension, followed by renewed uncertainty. Did something change? Did I miss something? What if this gets worse? What if this means I am slipping? What if this proves I am not in control? The brain becomes obsessed, not because obsession works, but because it occasionally offers tiny emotional rewards. That is enough to keep the loop alive. The truth is, anxiety loves numbers because numbers look objective. They make fear feel justified. They let emotional instability dress up as logic. You can tell yourself you are being practical while your body is living in a constant state of low-grade emergency. And the cost is severe. It steals attention from your work. It steals presence from your relationships. It steals silence from your mind. It makes you physically present and mentally absent, always running calculations in the background, always measuring, always bracing. Pause here. Exhaustion is not always from lack of money. Sometimes it is from never letting yourself stop scanning for proof that you still matter. That is why financial success alone does not create peace. People imagine a specific number will switch the machine off. It usually does not. It may soften the pressure for a while. It may remove real problems. That matters. But if identity is still fragile, the machine simply upgrades. Now you worry about losing what you built. Now you fear maintenance instead of scarcity. Now the anxiety shifts from not enough to what if this disappears? Different amount, same captivity. This is where most people stop. They chase relief through accumulation, then wonder why relief never becomes rest. Because the system was never designed for rest. It was designed for vigilance. It was built on the belief that your worth requires constant confirmation. Under that belief, calm feels irresponsible. Calm feels dangerous. Calm feels like falling behind, so you stay activated, you stay informed beyond what is useful, you stay emotionally tied to every movement. You mistake obsession for discipline, but discipline creates order. Obsession destroys it. There is a difference between financial awareness and financial fixation. Awareness looks directly, makes decisions, updates the plan, and then returns to life. Fixation circles the same information with no added power, only added strain. Awareness serves action. Fixation serves fear. One is clean. One is sticky. Stop and ask yourself, when you look at your finances, do you leave clearer or heavier? Do you act or do you spiral? Do you review or do you ruminate? Your answer tells you whether you are using the tool or feeding the machine. The truth is, many people are not anxious because their situation is truly collapsing. They are anxious because their identity has no stable ground outside performance. If money goes down, the self goes down. If progress slows, self-respect slows. If uncertainty rises, dignity feels at risk. That is why the reaction is so intense. The threat is not being interpreted as temporary. It is being interpreted as personal. This is what makes even good news unstable. A big month does not produce lasting relief because the mind immediately turns it into a standard. Now you have to repeat it. Now you have to protect it. Now falling below it feels humiliating. Success becomes another thing to defend rather than a reality to use wisely. And so the machine runs, fast when you are scared, faster when you are winning. It does not really care which. It only cares that you keep tying your value to the outcome. That is its fuel source. You can hear it in your own thoughts. I need one more win, and then I can relax. I just need a little more, and then I will feel safe. I need to get back to where I was, so I can feel like myself again. Listen carefully. Every sentence assumes yourself is waiting for the number to authorize it. It is not. Yourself was there before the number. Your discipline was there before the invoice. Your character was there before the market opened this morning. The machine survives by making you forget that. And until you remember it, the cycle will keep eating energy you can never fully recover. Hours of checking, days of tension, weeks of internal noise, years of living like every financial fluctuation is a referendum on your worth. You are not anxious only because your situation might be dangerous. You are anxious because your identity has been made fragile, and fragile identities cling to whatever society tells them counts as proof. Chapter 4. The Moral Scorecard. Look at the world long enough, and you start to notice the script. Money is not just treated as a useful thing, it is treated as evidence. Evidence of discipline, evidence of intelligence, evidence of restraint, evidence of superiority. People see wealth and quietly assume virtue. They see struggle and quietly assume failure. Nobody has to say it out loud. The hierarchy is already in the room. This is one of the deepest distortions in modern life. A person with money is often granted respect before they have revealed their character. A person without money is often forced to defend their worth before they have even spoken. The scorecard is invisible, but its pressure is everywhere. It shapes who gets admired, who gets interrupted, who gets listened to, who gets excused, who gets judged. And the worst part is how normal it has become. Stop for a second. How often have you assumed someone successful must also be more disciplined, more focused, more responsible, more deserving? How often have you assumed someone struggling must have made weaker choices? Be honest, because this moral scorecard lives in the culture, and if you are not careful, it lives in you too. It teaches you to read financial outcome as moral truth. Rich means strong, poor means weak. High earning means sharp, low earning means careless, security means wisdom, need means defect. That story is seductive because it makes the world feel neat. It is also false. Money can reflect skill in a certain domain. It can reflect timing, leverage, inheritance, networks, luck, market conditions, appetite for risk, social access, health, stability, and thousands of hidden variables. It can also reflect discipline. Sometimes it does, but to turn wealth into moral proof is lazy thinking. It ignores reality because it prefers a flattering myth. The truth is, character and currency measure entirely different things. Money can tell you what someone has. It cannot tell you what someone honors. Money can reveal capacity in a market. It cannot reveal courage in silence. Money can buy comfort. It cannot buy integrity. Pause here. Think of the people who had visible success and private emptiness. Think of the people with modest means and uncommon dignity. You already know the scorecard fails. You have seen it fail. But culture keeps repeating the lie because the lie is profitable. It keeps the wealthy morally inflated. It keeps the struggling morally ashamed. It keeps everyone competing inside a system that confuses possession with personhood. This damages the wealthy too, even if they seem to benefit from it. If someone starts believing their money proves their superiority, they stop developing in the places that matter most. They become dependent on status for identity. They confuse being admired with being solid. They mistake access for depth. They get praised for outcomes and begin neglecting the inner work that makes a human being trustworthy. Then the money shifts, or the market turns, or age strips the image down, and suddenly the self they built has no spine. This is where most people stop. They see the injustice done to those with less, but they do not see the corruption done to those with more. The scorecard poisons both sides. One side gets shame, the other gets illusion, neither gets truth. And the truth is simple. Financial condition is a circumstance. Moral worth is a choice lived through action. Those are not the same category. A person can have very little and carry immense discipline. A person can have a lot and live in vanity, fear, and emotional chaos. A person can build wealth honorably. A person can also inherit, exploit, posture, or simply arrive at the right place at the right time. The number alone does not settle the issue. It never did. Stop and breathe. You do not owe reverence to money. You do not owe shame to scarcity. You owe truth your attention. This matters because as long as you accept the scorecard, you will keep trying to improve your moral standing through financial performance. You will keep chasing approval from people who are reading the wrong measurement. You will keep feeling secretly contaminated by any dip in status. You will keep treating money like a report card on your soul. It is not. That report card does not exist. It was invented by people who benefited from a world where numbers decide who gets to feel superior and who gets told to work harder with their head down. It was repeated by institutions that need your insecurity to stay useful. It was absorbed by families that pass down their own fear without realizing it. And now it lives in reflexes so automatic that many people never challenge it. Challenge it now. If discipline matters, judge it by conduct. If intelligence matters, judge it by how you think. If integrity matters, judge it by action when nobody is watching. If compassion matters, judge it by how power gets used. That is a real scorecard. Harder to fake, harder to buy, harder to manipulate. It demands substance, not display. The truth is, once you see that wealth and worth are separate, a strange freedom begins to appear. You stop resenting people for having more. You stop condemning yourself for having less. You stop turning every financial difference into a spiritual difference. You stop kneeling at a false altar. And with that freedom comes anger. Not wild anger, clean anger. The kind that comes when you realize how much of your inner life was organized around a lie. How many hours did you spend feeling small because culture told you to? How many decisions were bent by a system that gains power every time you confuse market value with human value? Let that anger clarify you, not harden you, clarify you. Because once the false hierarchy breaks, you can finally ask a cleaner question. If money is not a moral scorecard, then what is it actually? Chapter 5. What money actually is. Set the emotion down for a moment. Not forever, just long enough to see clearly. Money is a tool, nothing holy, nothing evil, nothing personal. A tool, a medium of exchange, a storage of value, a method for moving effort across time. That is all. The rest is projection. The rest is story. The rest is what anxious people, wounded people, status-hungry people, and frightened cultures layered onto it. A tool is useful. A tool is not identity. A hammer can build a house or break a window. Its moral content depends on the hand using it. You do not stare at a hammer and ask if it makes you worthy. You do not wake up crushed because your hammer does not prove your dignity. You understand its place. You understand its limits. Money deserves the same clarity. Stop here. Say it plainly in your own mind. Money is a tool. It is not a verdict. This sounds simple, but simple truth often has to fight through years of emotional residue. Most people do not approach money as a tool. They approach it as a symbol carrying fear, longing, memory, comparison, and hunger for control. Then they wonder why their decisions become distorted. Emotionally loaded tools get used badly. If you treat money like identity, you will overspend to feel visible, underinvest because fear rules your hands, overwork because rest feels guilty, panic sell because loss feels personal, cling because scarcity feels like death, or chase because status feels like oxygen. In each case, the tool is no longer being used. It is being worshipped or feared. That destroys judgment. Neutrality improves decision-making by restoring proportion. When money is no longer tied to self-esteem, you can look at it without flinching. You can make cleaner choices. You can delay gratification without feeling erased. You can take calculated risk without turning every outcome into a personal referendum. You can lose without collapsing. You can gain without becoming arrogant. This is power, not emotional numbness. Emotional order. Pause for a second. Think of the best decisions you have made in life, the strongest ones, the calmest ones. They probably did not come from panic. They came from clarity. Money deserves that same clarity. People often think detachment means not caring. It does not. Detachment means caring correctly. It means giving the right amount of emotional weight to the thing in front of you. A bill deserves attention. It does not deserve your identity. A loss deserves adjustment. It does not deserve your self-hatred. An opportunity deserves evaluation. It does not deserve blind worship. This is where most people stop. They either become emotionally fused with money, or they pretend money does not matter at all. Both positions are childish. Fusion makes you reactive. Denial makes you reckless. Sovereignty sits in the middle. Money matters. It is useful. It affects options, stress, timing, and freedom. But it is still a tool, not a soul, not a judge, not a source of meaning. The truth is, your financial life gets better the moment money loses its drama. Drama feels intense, but it clouds reality. You do not need more intensity around money. You need more accuracy. You need to see what is there without the extra story. This is the number. This is the cost. This is the plan. This is the trade-off. Clean, direct, without the hidden sentence attached, which is usually something like, and this means I am failing. No. It means a fact is present. Now act. A hammer analogy sounds almost too plain for the emotional mess people live in, but that is exactly why it matters. Simplicity cuts through distortion. A hammer does not define the user. A full toolbox does not make someone wise. A broken tool does not make someone worthless. It only tells you what condition the tool is in and what needs to happen next. Money is the same. A person with more of it is not automatically better. A person with less of it is not automatically less. A person handling it well is showing skill, not superiority. A person handling it poorly needs correction, not spiritual condemnation. Stop here. How much suffering comes from giving money powers it does not possess? How much shame comes from treating a neutral instrument like a moral witness? When you strip money back to function, something heavy falls off your shoulders. You stop needing every number to flatter you. You stop taking every fluctuation as an insult. You start seeing resources, not revelations. That shift does not make you careless. It makes you precise. Because now you can finally respond to reality rather than to the storm of meaning you once attached to it. This is the beginning of quiet, not because all financial pressure disappears. It does not. But because the pressure no longer reaches your core. It stays where it belongs. In the practical field, in the space of planning, discipline, and trade-off, not in the space of dignity. And when dignity is no longer on the line, your whole financial posture changes. You breathe differently, you review differently, you decide differently. You become less dramatic and more dangerous in the best way, more controlled, more exact, less needy, less impressionable, harder to manipulate. The truth is, tools work best in steady hands, and steady hands come from a steady self. A hammer does not make you a carpenter. Money does not make you worthy. Both are tools, nothing else. Once you see that clearly, you are finally ready to examine the stories inside you that still keep reaching for the tool as if it were a mirror. Chapter 6. The Internal Audit. Now comes the part most people avoid. Not because it is complicated, because it is intimate. It is easier to complain about stress than to examine the private script that turns stress into identity pain. It is easier to say money makes you anxious than to sit still long enough to ask what exact sentence gets activated inside you when the numbers tighten. But that sentence is the real issue. Until it is named, it rules from the dark. You cannot clean a room you refuse to enter. So enter. The first step is simple. Catch the thought that appears right after financial pressure hits. Not the polished thought you give other people. The raw one, the fast one, the sentence with teeth in it. I am behind. I am failing. I should be doing better by now. I will never be safe. People will see I am not enough. I am not the kind of person who wins. That is the material. Stop for a second. What do you tell yourself when money gets tight? What do you tell yourself when an opportunity disappears? What do you tell yourself when someone else seems ahead? Write it down mentally if you have to. No editing. These are not just passing thoughts. They are narratives, repeated inner stories that shape perception, behavior, and emotion. And most financial anxiety is not caused by events alone. It is caused by the narrative wrapped around the event. There are a few common ones. The first is, more money means more worth. This narrative turns every gain into emotional permission and every loss into emotional punishment. It creates constant instability because the self is being valued by a moving number. The second is, if I struggle financially, I am defective. This one makes temporary hardship feel like permanent identity. It floods practical problems with shame. Instead of solving the issue, you start defending your ego from it. The third is, I must prove myself through visible success. This narrative is fueled by comparison and performance. It makes you spend, work, posture, and chase from a place of exposure. You do not want wealth only for function. You want it to silence something. The fourth is, I am only safe if I am in total control. This one creates obsessive monitoring. Every unknown becomes intolerable. The nervous system stays activated because certainty is being treated like survival. The fifth is, people like me never really get ahead. This narrative can come from family history, class identity, repeated setbacks, or old humiliation. It creates self-sabotage because progress starts to feel unnatural. When success arrives, part of you distrusts it. Pause here. Which one landed hardest? Which one felt familiar before you even finished hearing it? That is not random. That is your doorway. Now separate thought from identity. You have a narrative. You are not the narrative. You experience fear. You are not fear. You inherited beliefs. You are not required to protect them. This distinction matters because people often cling to damaging money stories simply because the stories have been around so long they feel like self. They are not self. They are conditioning with your voice attached. This is where most people stop. They name the pattern once, feel exposed, then rush back into distraction. But naming is not enough. The story has to be challenged, calmly, repeatedly, with facts, with observation, with discipline. If the thought is, "I am behind," ask behind whom, by what timeline, according to which standard. Is that standard chosen or inherited? If the thought is, "I am failing," ask what specifically failed. A plan, a month, a projection, fine. But why are you turning an event into an identity sentence? If the thought is, "I will never be safe," ask whether the feeling describes the present or echoes an older fear. The truth is, internal narratives lose power when they are dragged into clear light. Not because the process feels pleasant, because distortion weakens when examined. A lie can live for years in a fast mind. It struggles in a slow one. So slow down. Catch the sentence. Question the sentence. Replace the sentence. Not with fantasy, with truth. A cleaner narrative might sound like this: my finances require discipline, not self-contempt. My current number reflects conditions and choices, not my human value. I can improve my position without treating myself like a problem. Money deserves strategy. My identity deserves steadiness. Read that closely. This is not empty affirmation. It is structural correction. You are not trying to feel better for 10 minutes. You are writing a new operating code, a financial identity grounded in character instead of currency. That means your worth comes from conduct, from honesty, from restraint, from responsibility, from how you respond under pressure, not from the applause that arrives after a good quarter. Stop here. If money disappeared tomorrow, what traits would still remain in you? Discipline, creativity, endurance, integrity, resourcefulness, courage. Those are identity. Numbers are conditions. The new financial self is not careless. It is not passive. It does not pretend bills are spiritual illusions. It simply refuses to collapse the self into the spreadsheet. It handles the practical with seriousness and the inner world with control. It stops begging money to solve the wrong problem. That is sovereignty beginning to take shape. But you cannot rewrite what you refuse to read. This was the reading, and once the story is on the table, a more mature and stronger philosophy becomes available to you. One that understood the danger of externals long before modern culture made anxiety look normal. Chapter 7. Stoic Detachment and Wealth. There is a form of strength that does not panic in the presence of change. Not because it is cold, because it knows what belongs to it and what does not. The Stoics built their lives on that distinction. They looked at the world and saw that most human suffering came from confusion about control. People tied themselves to outcomes, possessions, praise, status, and comfort, only to feel betrayed when those things shifted. The Stoics did not deny the value of external things. They denied those things the power to define the soul. That is the lesson modern financial life forgot. Money is external, useful, powerful, consequential, still external. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire and still reminded himself that loss, praise, comfort, and pain do not determine character unless he surrenders his judgment to them. That is discipline, not performance. Discipline of perception, discipline of response, discipline of inner government. Stop for a second. What in your financial life are you treating like it owns your peace? What have you allowed to enter the throne room of your mind without earning the right? Stoic detachment is often misunderstood. People hear detachment and think of indifference in the lazy sense, numbness, withdrawal, lack of ambition. That is not the Stoic position. Detachment is not apathy. It is clean engagement. It means you act fully, think clearly, plan seriously, and still refuse to hand your identity over to the outcome. That is the highest form of involvement because it keeps you effective under pressure. If you are attached to money as proof of worth, you will distort decisions to protect ego. You will chase fast validation. You will avoid necessary risk because loss feels humiliating. You will cling too long out of fear. You will react instead of respond. But if you see money as preferred rather than sacred, then you can handle it with steadier hands. You can think, you can wait, you can choose. The truth is, detachment improves financial behavior by reducing emotional interference. A calm mind can budget. A calm mind can hold cash without shame. A calm mind can say no to status spending. A calm mind can admit error and correct fast. Pause here. This is not soft philosophy. This is practical power. The Stoics called wealth a preferred external. Better to have it than not, all else equal. But never mistake preference for identity. Never let the preferred become the master, because the moment your peace depends on externals, you have become easy to control. Anyone who can move the external can move you. This is where most people stop. They want the language of freedom without the cost of discipline. They want peace after the numbers rise, not before. They want the market to calm them, the income to confirm them, the outcome to stabilize them. That is backward. Stoic thinking reverses it. You stabilize first, then you enter the market. You govern yourself first, then you handle the tool. Difficulties become different under this lens. A setback is not condemnation, it is information. A lean season is not proof that you are small. It is material for discipline. A loss does not strip away worth. It reveals where attachment still lives. The Stoic does not ask, "Why is this happening to me?" The Stoic asks, "What is this giving me a chance to practice?" That question changes everything. It turns financial stress into training. It turns uncertainty into a test of judgment. It turns delay into a lesson in restraint. It turns exposure into a chance to separate self from circumstance. Stop and breathe. Can you imagine what your financial decisions would look like if nothing external had the right to call you worthless? Can you imagine reviewing a loss without self-hatred, planning a recovery without panic, building wealth without kneeling to it? That is Stoic wealth. Not rejection of money, refusal of enslavement. The Stoics did not avoid success. They simply refused to let success define the state of the soul. They knew that the person who depends on wealth for identity is poor long before the money disappears, and the person who remains anchored in character can endure fluctuation without internal collapse. This is the power of indifference to externals. Not that you never prefer one outcome over another. Of course you do. You prefer stability to chaos, provision to lack, competence to confusion. But preference is not bondage. Preference says, "I will work for this." Bondage says, "I am nothing without this." The truth is, modern financial fear often comes from forgetting that distinction. You can pursue wealth with discipline. You can respect money without worshipping it. You can want more and still remain free. That is the line. And once you start living on that line, a stronger identity begins to form. One not built on valuation, but on values. One that financial pressure can test without reaching the core. The Stoics did not avoid wealth. They simply refused to let wealth decide who they were. Now you need to do the same in practice, day after day, until identity becomes stronger than circumstance. Chapter 8. Building Unshakable Financial Identity. You do not become sovereign when pressure disappears. You become sovereign when pressure arrives and finds nothing in you willing to kneel. That is the work now, not just seeing the lie, not just naming the pattern. Building something stronger in its place, an identity with weight, an inner standard that market swings, delayed payments, lean months, and visible comparison cannot easily reach. If your worth is based on valuation, you will live at the mercy of movement. If your worth is based on values, you gain ground no matter what the market is doing. That does not mean outcomes stop mattering. It means outcomes no longer decide who you are. This shift has to become daily, not theoretical, daily. Stop for a second. What do you actually respect in yourself when no money is involved? Discipline, honesty, restraint, precision, endurance, courage, responsibility. These are not decorations, these are foundations. Build there. An unshakable financial identity begins with a simple principle. I judge myself by how I handle money, not by how much I currently have. That is clean. That is stable. It means a hard season can still contain dignity. A low number can still coexist with self-respect. A setback can still be met with control. This changes the emotional texture of your decisions. You save because restraint matters, not because you are terrified of being exposed. You spend with intention because choice matters, not because you need image. You invest with patience because discipline matters, not because you need dramatic proof. You recover from loss by returning to principle, not by spiraling into shame. Pause here. This is the difference between an anxious identity and a sovereign one. The anxious identity asks, what does this say about me? The sovereign identity asks, what does this require from me? One collapses inward. One stands up. To build this, you need repeated acts of alignment, small ones, daily ones. Review your numbers without theatrics. Make decisions from plan, not mood. Delay unnecessary spending even when emotion wants relief. Speak about money in factual language rather than self-condemning language. Refuse comparison as a measure of human value. Practice being unimpressed by visible status. Practice being unashamed by temporary lack. That is identity training. This is where most people stop. They want one powerful insight to erase years of conditioning. It does not work that way. Insight opens the door. Repetition builds the house. If you want financial sovereignty, you need ritual, not empty ritual, directed ritual, behaviors that teach your nervous system a new truth. The number moved, and I remained myself. The plan changed, and I remained myself. The pressure rose, and I remained myself. That is how stability becomes real. The truth is, financial loss only becomes identity collapse when the identity was sitting on the loss in the first place. Move the identity. Put it somewhere deeper. Put it in the qualities that survive fluctuation. The market can touch your portfolio. It cannot touch your honesty. A bad quarter can touch your cash flow. It cannot touch your ability to stay disciplined. A setback can touch timing. It cannot touch character unless you surrender it. Stop and think. What part of you can a market crash never reach? Find that. Stand there. When that becomes the place you live from, money starts returning to its proper role. Important, but not ultimate. Serious, but not sacred. capable of improving life, but incapable of becoming life itself. From that posture, even ambition becomes cleaner. You can build aggressively without building desperately. You can want more without needing more to feel human. Relationships change too. When you no longer depend on money for worth, you stop using it to negotiate love, admiration, and status. You become harder to bait, harder to shame, harder to control. You listen differently. You compare less. You posture less. You can be around wealth without feeling small, and around struggle without feeling contaminated. That is freedom with teeth. Not loud, not flashy, stable, and it keeps compounding. Every time you meet pressure without self-betrayal, you reinforce the new identity. Every time you respond instead of react, you deepen control. Every time you refuse to let the number write the sentence, you become more difficult for fear to manipulate. The market will rise and fall for the rest of your life. You need something inside you that does neither. Once that is built, the way you move through the world changes. Decisions stop coming from panic and start coming from principle. And that is where true autonomy begins to show itself in ordinary life. Chapter 9. True Autonomy. Living the Principle. Sovereignty is not a speech you give yourself once. It is a way of moving, a way to check your account without assessing your worth at the same time. A way of making a hard choice without flooding it with shame. A way of seeing opportunity without desperation and setback, without collapse. It is not glamorous. It is clean, quiet, repeated. That is why it changes everything. When decisions come from anxiety, they are usually contaminated before they begin. You rush because delay feels unsafe. You say yes because being chosen feels necessary. You overspend because image feels protective. You cling to bad deals because loss feels like identity death. Anxiety makes money decisions feel urgent, even when they are not. Autonomy slows the pulse. Not the action, the pulse. Stop for a second. Think about one financial decision you regret. Look beneath the surface. Was it really about money? Or was it about fear, pride, loneliness, comparison, or the need to prove something fast? That is the difference. A sovereign mind does not ask money to solve emotional problems. It asks money to perform practical functions. Rent, margin, time, protection, mobility, choice. That clarity removes so much noise that better decisions start looking almost obvious. You turn down the purchase you do not need. You wait before reacting to a loss. You ask a cleaner question before taking a risk. You walk away from deals that insult your values, even if they flatter your vanity. That is autonomy, not getting everything you want, not feeling good all the time, governing your choices from the inside rather than being dragged by hidden pressure. The truth is, relationships become different too. When your worth is self-determined, other people lose the power to intimidate you financially as easily. You can admire success without worshipping it. You can hear someone talk numbers without feeling reduced. You can discuss money with less defensiveness, because your identity is not sitting on the table, waiting to be evaluated. This is where most people stop. They want independence in theory, but in practice they still want room to be approved of. They still want the visible symbols to protect them from feeling ordinary. They still want more money, not only for freedom, but for permission to finally respect themselves. That dependence bleeds into everything. Dating, family, friendship, business. Every interaction carries a hidden bid for confirmation. When that bid disappears, peace enters. Not because other people suddenly change, because you no longer ask them or your finances to settle your internal case. You carry your own verdict. And because you carry it, you stop over-explaining, over-performing, over-buying, over-chasing. Pause here. What do you stop needing when money no longer defines you? Less applause, less comparison, less proof, less theater, less urgency to look successful while still feeling empty. That compound effect matters more than most people realize. One sovereign decision does not feel dramatic. 10 years of sovereign decisions change a life. You save differently, invest differently, recover differently, negotiate differently, work differently. You choose partners differently. You choose opportunities differently. You build a nervous system that does not leak power whenever external conditions change. That is what compounds first: identity. Then money often follows more intelligently, because the person who does not need money to feel worthy usually handles money better. Less impulse, less vanity, less panic, more patience, more selectivity, more control, better questions, better timing, better boundaries. The external result may improve precisely because the internal dependency weakened. That is one of the great ironies. The less you need money to define you, the more capable you become of directing it well. Stop for one more second. Picture yourself in a hard financial season, but without self-contempt. Picture yourself in a prosperous season, but without arrogance. Picture yourself in both states, still recognizable to yourself. That is the target. True autonomy is not the absence of pressure. It is the absence of self-abandonment under pressure. You still feel concern. You still make hard choices. You still care deeply about provision, stability, and direction, but you no longer hand the core of you to the outcome. The practical gets your effort. The inner self keeps its ground. The truth is, that kind of person becomes difficult to manipulate. Marketing loses force. Status games lose force. Cultural panic loses force. Even envy loses its force, because it depends on the idea that someone else having more somehow makes you less. Once that lie breaks, other people can be ahead without your identity going into debt. Then money becomes quieter. It becomes useful again. It becomes something you direct rather than something you beg. And when that becomes your daily operating principle, one final integration remains: not another tactic, not another rule, a permanent way of standing in your own life. The person who does not need money to feel worthy will always make better decisions about money. Chapter 10. The Sovereign Mind. This is where the pieces settle, not into perfection, into principle. A sovereign mind does not wait for ideal conditions to become itself. It does not postpone self-respect until a number is reached. It does not treat wealth like a crown or lack like a confession. It stands on something deeper: character over currency, conduct over image, choice over panic, truth over theater. That is the operating principle now. Character over currency. Say it slowly in your own mind, because if you live by that for 10 years, your financial life will not just look different, it will feel different from the inside. That matters more than people admit. There are many forms of success that still feel like captivity: more money, more image, more constant tension, more fear of loss, more comparison, more dependence on symbols. None of that is sovereignty. Sovereignty feels cleaner than that. Stop for a second. Imagine 10 years of handling money without linking it to your dignity. 10 years of disciplined review without self-attack. 10 years of earning without worshipping income. 10 years of spending without performing status. 10 years of setbacks that do not turn into identity funerals. What kind of person would that build? A stronger one, a quieter one, a more dangerous one, in the best sense. Harder to shake, harder to bait, harder to own. This is where most people stop. They make peace with some version of financial anxiety, as if it is the admission fee for ambition. They assume adulthood means permanent background stress. They assume pressure is proof they care. They assume obsession is the cost of winning. But the truth is, obsession is often the tax paid by people who never separated worth from outcome. You do not need that tax. You need standards. You need discipline. You need honesty. You need patience. You need the ability to look directly at your life without turning every challenge into an accusation against yourself. That is the sovereign mind. It does not deny reality. It refuses distortion. If money grows, it uses it well. If money shrinks, it adjusts without kneeling. If pressure rises, it does not start negotiating away dignity. If opportunity comes, it does not abandon principle to grab it. This is not flashy. It will not always impress the room. Some people are addicted to visible signs of value, and a self-governed person threatens them simply by existing. Because a self-governed person cannot be easily lured, cannot be shamed as easily, cannot be sold an identity as easily. Pause here. What legacy do you want to pass forward? Not what amount, what principle? Because if you pass down the old lie, the cycle continues. Children learn that numbers decide emotional weather. Families inherit tension as identity. Culture keeps manufacturing people who mistake net worth for human worth. But if you pass down a different principle, the line breaks. Money is a tool. Character is the measure. Pressure is real. Panic is optional. Worth is inherent. Conduct is chosen. That is legacy beyond net worth. It teaches the next person to build stability before status, to seek provision without worship, to respect discipline more than display, to understand that external success is best carried by an internal spine. Otherwise, its weight crushes the person holding it. The truth is, financial sovereignty was never only about feeling calmer around money. It was about reclaiming authorship over your own identity. It was about refusing to let markets, balances, culture, family conditioning, and visible comparison write the most important sentence in your life. Who are you? You are what you repeatedly choose under pressure. You are what you protect when losing would be easier. You are what you honor when nobody is impressed. That is where worth lives, not in the account, not in the applause, not in the symbols. Here, in conduct, in truth, in the controlled mind that refuses to sell itself to externals. Let the final declaration be simple. You can pursue wealth without serving it. You can build without bowing. You can recover without despising yourself. You can live in a world obsessed with price and still remember the one thing that was never for sale. You did not come here to be defined by what you own. You came here to decide what you stand for. That decision starts now. Wealth will come and go for the rest of your life. The question was never how much you have. The question is who you are when you have nothing. That is the only version of you that was ever real. Money can expand your options. It cannot create your spine. A full account does not make you clean. An empty season does not make you less human. What you own is unstable. What you practice becomes identity. The truth is, peace begins where performance ends. This is where most people stop. They keep asking numbers to settle inner questions. Numbers were never built for that. A tool can serve your life. It cannot define your life. Character is slower to build. It is also harder to lose. Silence will teach you what status never can. Discipline will protect you where image never will. Control begins the moment you stop negotiating your worth. You do not need money to respect yourself. You need truth. You need choice. You need the courage to remain yourself under pressure. Everything else was decoration.